Good evening. About to start this in a minute or two. All right. I decided to start this stream today because there's a lot of articles. So I don't want to fall behind or be cramped, pressed for time on Sunday. Sunday evenings is where I usually do this, but I'm going to spread it and try to read a couple, maybe 2 or 3 articles today, and then read whatever is available for Sunday evening. Ready? Let's get going. So an article that popped up right away, right after our stream on Sunday evening, was this one here. It says January 26th. I'm not sure if it was delayed or if I just didn't refresh the page, but we'll start with this one tonight. Again, this is a read-along playlist. I do live stream these as I read them and then make my comments or thoughts on it. Hopefully with time, we'll have people join in, read along, and comment or respond to comments. This is for my own personal growth as well as for the personal growth of anybody else that's interested in reading and perhaps joining the group. Eventually, I'll have guests online event, as things roll along and this takes a life of its own, perhaps. All right. As usual, the article I'll be reading today is from liberationnews.org. Feel free to hit the links in the description box if you'd like to support Liberation News or if you'd like to read along. The first article here is a PSL statement on ICJ initial ruling on Israeli genocide case brought by South Africa. And this one was released by Party for Socialism and Liberation, January 26, 2024. It's about a 5-minute read. Let's look at the image here. Let's see the answer, let Gaza live. All right, let's move along. The provisional measures announced today by the International Court of Justice in the case brought by South Africa against Israel has recognized the terrible brutality and genocidal rhetoric directed by the Israeli regime against Palestinians, formally acknowledging this reality in a principal body of international law. At the same time, the court failed to live up to the expectations of the people of the world, who have been demanding in huge numbers an immediate ceasefire. The ICJ ordered that the State of Israel shall take all measures within its powers to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of this convention on the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide, in particular, killing members of the group Palestinians, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. The court also ordered that Israel prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip, and enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The ICJ provisional measures also included a prohibition of the destruction of evidence that genocide has been committed, and an order that Israel report in 1 month to the court on the steps it has taken to comply with the ruling. Following the ICJ's announcement, South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor argued that in exercising the order, there would have to be a ceasefire. Without it, the order doesn't actually work. While Pandor noted that she would have wanted that the word secession is included in the judgment, If Israel is to comply with the provisional orders, then that requires a ceasefire. In failing to order an outright halt to the Israeli war machine's onslaught in Gaza, the ICJ is applying a double standard. When Ukraine took Russia to the court on charges of genocide, the ICJ issued preliminary measures in March of 2022, which stated that Russia must immediately suspend the military operations that it commenced on 24 February 2022 in the territory of Ukraine. The deaths of Ukrainians, overwhelmingly soldiers engaged in combat, not civilians as in the case in Gaza, was treated with much more urgency than the deaths in Palestinians. As an institution, the ICJ's priorities reflect the strategic interests of the imperialist powers that dominate world politics. 17 judges from different countries presided over the genocidal trial, but the president of the ICJ is from the United States, Joanne Donoghue. Before joining the court in 2010, Donoghue was a high-ranking State Department official. As the lead judge, she was in a unique position to shape the provisional measures and prevent the inclusion of a ceasefire. While everything comes down to the question of implementation, the other provisional measures do not necessarily contradict the interest of U.S. imperialism. The resistance of the Palestinian people and the strength of the global solidarity movement has opened up serious contradictions between the U.S. and Israeli governments. The right wing of the Israeli ruling class is determined to push on with its war of annihilation in Gaza at all costs and recolonize the area. But the sheer brutality on display is having a profoundly discrediting and isolating effect on the international position of the U.S. empire. It is also causing serious domestic political problems for Biden, especially as the presidential election campaign heats up. A protracted, lower-intensity war where Israel conducts routine raids and inflicts terror on the Palestinian population without the spectacular, devastated bombing campaign that has appalled the world may be the preferred option for the Biden administration. U.S. isolated, the world stands with Palestine. But the failure to order a ceasefire notwithstanding that the court would find the situation in Gaza to be dire enough to issue emergency provisional measures of any kind in a case of genocide against Israel is hugely embarrassing to the U.S. empire. The U.S. government is Israel's main sponsor and protector. Israel is rightfully understood around the world as an extension of U.S. imperial power, and any ruling that implies horrific crimes were committed by Israel also implicates the United States. When it suits its interests, the U.S. government loves to lecture the world about international law. For instance, during the controversy last year when a supposed Chinese spy balloon flew over the United States, Secretary of State Blinken told his counterpart Wang Yi that this was a clear violation of international law. If a simple balloon is enough to set off alarm bells in Washington about breach of international law, then what about the murder of 12,000 children? The hypocrisy is beyond words. International public opinion is firmly behind the Palestinian people's struggle for freedom. This is true overwhelmingly in the global South, and it is also true inside the United States and other countries that have historically been sponsors of Israel. Governments all around the world, including those that are typically in the same camp as U.S. imperialism, feel compelled to speak out about the U.S.-Israel atrocities in Gaza. South Africa's admirable decision to take Israel to court for genocide reflects the view of the clear majority of humanity. The system of international law currently in place reflects a world order dominated by the big imperialist powers. As a consequence, there is no clear enforcement mechanism when it comes to addressing violations committed by those imperial powers or their allies. When the UN Security Council passed a resolution in 2011 against the then government of Libya, led by Muammar Gaddafi, NATO enforced it by bombing the country to oblivion. But when the United Nations General Assembly voted overwhelmingly last month in favor of a resolution supporting a ceasefire, unsurprisingly, there was no imperialist military alliance that jumped into action to force its implementation. The ICJ initial ruling is an important political development, but it remains up to the global people's movement to actually bring an end to the genocide in Gaza. The steadfastness of the Palestinian people combined with international solidarity is a formula for victory. Biden is guilty of genocide too. Joe Biden deserves to be on trial too. As the genocide grinds on, every day he is presiding over the massive transfer of arms and ammunition to the Israel war machine. The bombs and missiles that rain down on Palestinian hospitals, schools, and residential neighborhoods are made in the USA and delivered by US warplanes. Along with military might of the United States, the Israeli regime also relies on US diplomatic support to carry out its crimes. Twice, the United States has abused its veto power on the United Nations Security Council to block binding resolutions in favor of a ceasefire, first on December 8th, and then again on December 22nd. In every international forum, Israel can rely on the United States to excuse their war crimes as acts of self-defense. Biden is a participant in this genocide. While he may have tactical differences with Netanyahu at times, he remains fundamentally a co-conspirator and, in fact, architect of one of the gravest crimes of the 21st century. Here in the United States and all around the world, the people's struggle will continue until the genocide in Gaza ends, Palestine is free, and war criminals are brought to justice. All right. Quick thoughts on this article. Pretty self-explanatory, descriptive. U.S. isolated the world, stands with Palestine. Small example of that, as stated in the paragraph here. A lot of other countries, nations, especially in South America, are against the bombing of women and children in Gaza. Surprise, right? No, not really. As well as here, a lot of people are not letting people like Biden and Harris and Kamala Harris speak at their election events without calling them war criminals, genocide Joe, freeing Palestine. Why? Because as we reiterate all the time, it is inexcusable. The excuses don't matter. You just don't bomb women and children and hospitals and schools with the fear or suspicion, not even critical evidence, but this is suspicion that they might be harboring or hiding or being used as shields, human shields for terrorists. So the only terrorists here are the people bombing women and children. And as people that are being terrorized in Palestine, they don't see people like Hamas as the terrorists. They see them as their liberators from decades of oppression. So this subject here will probably be the nail in the coffin for Biden, I think, election-wise, unless they finally get Trump fully charged with crimes for election fraud or whatever other things they're charging him with to make sure that he can run. But other than that, obviously there are other issues with Trump and Biden. First of all, they're over a century old. Just kidding. They're both like 80 years old. They're both going through cognitive decline. I don't think both of them would be able to pass general physical test if they were actually given a proper test. But here within regards to Palestine, yeah, he is losing major support here. Don't forget he has swing states that he needs to win, and a lot of swing states are very sensitive to these kinds of things. They're very sensitive to the immigration issue. They're very sensitive to the wars and intervention issues, and especially when it comes to the economy and labor. And Biden, that administration is not actually giving them great reasons to vote for him, especially when it comes to his Build Back Better plan or Bidenomics, where he thinks because he's saying that the economy is great, that the working class should be happy. That doesn't matter to the working class. If you, as a working class person or voter, have seen the economy is doing great, but your wages have been stagnant and everything else has gone up in price, you are probably not going to be voting for Biden, especially now that you see he's just as bad as Republicans. Biden is guilty of genocide too. Yeah, there. I mean, he has overstepped Congress twice already, as is said here on December 8th and in December 22nd. Uh, and he clearly sees what is going on. His only excuse for this, for these blunders, or for his moral bankruptcy, is that he's senile, or that he's a puppet, or both. There is nothing much else to say about that. Nobody in their right mind, with any moral judgment or decency, would greenlight and fund bombing cities, bombing towns. I hear about 50% of the building structure in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has now been leveled by bombs. You know, so not excusable. All right, so I'm gonna take a second here and drink a little bit of my tea while I set up for the next one. Let's see here. Here we go. PSL statement on ICJ initial ruling on Israel and genocide. Just read that one. Next one. This next one's called Cleveland Mechanics Strike Against Benefits Cuts. I'm going to take a sip for now. Give me just one moment. I'll set this one up. All right, and I'll be... Sorry, didn't mean to slurp or make too much noise, but it is what it is. All right, on to the next article here. Cleveland Mechanics Strike Against Benefit Cuts. This one was written by Kristen Lee, January 28th, 2024. It's a 3-minute read. On January 8th, members of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers Local 1363 held a solidarity event for their strike outside Valley Ford Truck in Cleveland. In attendance were members of the United Steelworkers, Teamsters, United Electrical Workers, American Federation of Government Employees, Service Employees, International Union, and United Auto Workers. Catalyzed by disputes over a new contract the company put forth, the mechanics of Valley Ford Truck unanimously voted to go on strike December 18, 2023. Although negotiations began in May 2023, Valley Ford Truck delayed negotiations and forced workers to make a choice: settle for a pay cut or strike a week before Christmas. Great choices. Previously, the company contributed $3.30 per hour to workers' 401k, about $6,800 per year. The new contract will move the $3.30 per hour to wages and cap the retirement distribution at $3,600 per year. By moving our money to our wages and capping the match at $3,600 a year, said Mark Bowser, union steward, told Liberation News, they're effectively taking half of our current retirement benefit away from us and telling us that's our raise. According to Bowser, this would also leave half of the current employees without a pay raise. The strike follows a long history of cuts to benefits since 2019, which saw workers losing their pension, leaving them with a 401k. The new contract also stipulates that if the economy crashes, the company can effectively change the percentage match and yearly cap. In addition, the company plans to reduce guaranteed weekly work hours, which puts workers in an even more uncertain position. These are benefits we have had for 68 years here that they're now trying to reduce. You have to wonder what the long-term plan is. What's next? Asked Bowser. Valley Ford truck workers are not alone. Companies big and small are cutting workers' benefits. According to USA Today, in addition to the cuts to 401k plans and hours worked, like Local 1363 is fighting, employers across America are also shutting down non-cash benefits like health and dental insurance, tuition assistance, and mobile phone discounts. Like Valley Forge Truck, these cuts hide behind raises that look good on paper but actually translate to companies giving less but getting to say they're doing more. Since the pandemic, companies have been making record profits and the rich, ruling class of America is squeezing workers from both sides. In a 2022 deep dive by The Guardian, an analysis examined the relationship between company profits and the historic inflation the country has seen since the pandemic. It found that corporations have used the imbalance of supply and demand from COVID-19 to massively increase their profit margins, even as Americans struggle to afford basic goods. One particularly egregious example was Chevron, which experienced a 240% profit spike while gas prices soared. It was part of the best 2 quarters the company has ever seen, and according to The Guardian, prompted the dividend increase and assurance it would keep production low to maintain high prices. The CEOs and shareholders may be stacking the deck, but every day more and more of the working class are realizing that the power of labor is in their hands. In 2023, there was a historic summer of strikes with picket lines for UAW, Starbucks Workers United, CEIU, SAG-AFTRA, and the Writers Guilds of America, drawing scores of supporters and wide media attention. 2/3 of Americans approve of unions, though only 10% of workers belong to a union. The 24 striking union members at Valley Forge Truck are a microcosm of the continuously rising tide of worker empowerment against exploitation by the rich and powerful. Though they are few in number, members of Locals 1363 know they represent something larger than themselves. Bowser says other dealers and union stores are watching. We're standing up for not just ourselves, but for other union workers, for the non-union workers. When you're fighting these companies, you're up against their board and the lawyers and the owners. When you have the union backing you, you have a lot more support and you level the playing field to get the rights that you deserve. When asked what people can do to support the strike effort, in addition to hand warmers and hot drinks, Bowser says the thing they'd like to see most is people standing in solidarity with him on the picket line. Valley Forge Truck is located at 5715 Cannell Road, Cleveland, Ohio, zip code 44125. And the feature photo, workers and supporters rally outside Valley Forge Truck in Cleveland on January 8th from Liberation News photo. In summary to this article, this is where I go back to how labor unions, strikes, these are originally organization and working class ideas that originated in the left back in the 1900s, 1920s, when communist, socialist parties would organize for strikes so that people could win rights like the 8-hour workday, 5-day work week, child labor laws, women equality laws. So what's happened with the unions throughout the decades is that they have been co-opted by the establishment, by the elites, by the corporations, and some way or another, they have been co-opted by the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. So that's why they lost their popularity generally, because when people were unionizing, the unions were not really representing them anymore. But even with all that, unions still do a better or attempt to make a better negotiation table for the working class. And what we need to do is, when we create unions, when we do unionize or strike for unionization, is to create, take the roadmap from the original union organizers, right? From the far left, socialist, communist, working class people that organized, and how to organize these unions so that they don't become corrupt, so that they actually stand for the workers. And really what a lot of that entails is just making sure that your union representatives are open that they're open about what their income is, what they're open about, what they're doing. You know, if they're not doing anything wrong, there's nothing to hide, right? So yeah, open up the books, make sure that people are being kept honest. That's what real democracy is. People governing themselves, right? One vote, one person, one vote. So I think this is good. I think it's good to support unions, especially when these union strikes are started by the actual people, because then you know it's an organic movement, that the people want this, and they rather strike and be united and hold out so that they represent the working class. So, like the article says, when people are striking, they're not just striking for their own benefits; they're striking for the benefits of all working class people, to show as an example that there's power in our numbers, that we are the ones that actually create the products, that our labor is what actually creates everything, right? So that people understand that we don't need the bosses. The bosses might have started the company, but we actually create the product and we actually create the wealth. So it should be redistributed properly to the working class. Cool. So that's this article. Let's see. I'm going to try to keep going here. The next one is Texas scheduled to execute Ivan Cantu despite new evidence, recantation of witnesses. All right. I'm just going to make sure here that everything is still looking good. Let's see. Test, microphone test. All right. Cool. And I'm going to take a sip and be right back. Got to get that tea in me. Keep warm and keep the vocals comfy. All right. Texas scheduled to execute Ivan Cantu despite new evidence, recantation of witnesses. Just reading this is sad. Just reading this headline is sad. Uh, Author is Caleb Granger, January 28th, 2024. It's about a 5-minute read. So this is going to be a little heavy. All right. On February 28th, Ivan Cantu, who has maintained his innocence for over 2 decades, is scheduled to become the 587th person put to death by the Texas killing machine since capital punishment was reinstated in 1976. Cantu was convicted of killing his cousin and his fiancée in 2001. In recent years, calls to halt his execution have grown louder as evidence has emerged that puts his guilt into question. Even 2 of the jurors who originally voted to convict him now support his appeals. An open and shut case or a frame-up with inadequate defense? As with so many death row cases, Cantu's conviction decades ago was initially presented as airtight, until the details started to emerge that contradicted the narrative. Did prosecutors who build their career on getting convictions at any cost coaxed out the story they wanted to hear at the expense of the truth? For the past 23 years, Ivan Cantu, now 49 years old, has been languishing on death row, convicted of the November 2000 killing of his cousin, James Mosqueda, and his cousin's fiancée, Amy Kitchen, in their North Dallas home. Prosecutors claim that Mosqueda and Kitchen were shot to death by Cantu in a robbery. Cantu claims that Mosqueda, a known drug dealer, and his fiancée were killed by a rival drug dealer who then framed him for the murders. All right. Give it a second here. Water's boiling. I don't know if you can hear it or not. All right, moving on. Prosecutors used forensic evidence and testimony from two witnesses to make their case. They pointed to the fact that Mosquera's car was located at Ivan Cantu's apartment the day after the couple was murdered. Police found a pair of bloody jeans and socks in Cantu's trash can days after the murders while he was out of town that matched the victim's DNA. And the gun used in the shooting was located at Cantu's friend's house with his fingerprints on the magazine. Cantu's fiancée at the time pinned the murders on him, and her brother claimed Cantu had discussed killing Mosquera with him beforehand. While Cantu continued to maintain his innocence, the prosecution presented this as an open and shut case. Nearly 20 years after the killings, Cantu's claim of innocence received new life when private investigator Matt Duff began looking into the case in 2019. Duff discovered many flaws and asserted that Cantu was misrepresented by his own defense team. He compiled his investigation into a 40-episode podcast called Cousins by Blood, which makes a compelling case that the man condemned to die may very well be put to death for a crime he didn't commit. Much of this reporting has since been corroborated by investigative journalists at the Texas Observer, among other courses. Cantu insists that his cousin and fiancée were killed by a rival drug dealer to whom he owed money. In a phone call with one of Mosquera's associates shortly after the killings, Cantu stated he'd been threatened at his apartment by a man looking for Mosquera. Cantu said he told Mosquera there was a man looking for him, and they made the decision to switch cars to give the appearance that Mosquera wasn't home. The physical evidence does not hold up to scrutiny. The bloody jeans and socks that were found in Cantu's trash were apparently not there at the time of the murders. According to a police officer who was at Cantu's apartment conducting a welfare check, the jeans weren't discovered until 3 days later when Cantu was out of town. They were 2 sizes larger than what Cantu wore at the time, and recent DNA tests were unable to establish that he was the one who wore them. Cantu's lawyers also pointed out that a call had been made from inside his apartment while he was away in Arkansas, indicating someone else was in his home. They also point out that while Cantu's fingerprints were on the magazine and the gun used to kill the couple, they were not on the murder weapon itself. To convict Cantu, the prosecution relied heavily on their star witnesses, Cantu's then fiancée, Amy Butcher. After Cantu's arrest in 2000, Butcher told police that Cantu committed the murders. She then testified under oath, and when she saw Cantu that night, his face was swollen or bruised, something that no one else who saw him that night mentioned. She also claimed that he'd stolen Mosquera's Rolex watch and she'd watched him throw it out their car window. In reality, the watch was later found by a relative of Amy Kitchens to have been at Mosquera's house all along. It was never stolen at all. Butcher claimed that Cantu had stolen a diamond engagement ring from Kitchen's body and used it to propose to her. Witnesses testified that Butcher had shown them the same ring a week before the murders occurred. Cantu's lawyers argue she committed perjury. Butcher wasn't the only supposed witness the state relied on to make their case. Jeff Butcher, Amy's brother, testified under oath that Cantu had told him before the killings that he was going to kill Mosquera and Kitchen. He claimed to have seen Cantu with the murder weapon and that he'd asked Jeff to help him clean up. After Amy Butcher died in 2021, however, Jeff Butcher completely changed his story. After more than 2 decades, the supposed witness contacted the Collins County District Attorney's office to clear his After more than 2 decades, the supposed witness contacted the Collins County District Attorney's office to clear his conscience, recanting his entire story. At every stage of the legal process, Cantu has received insulting and inadequate representation. Like the majority of defendants facing the death penalty, Cantu couldn't afford a lawyer. His public defender requested no expert to make his case during the trial, called 0 witnesses, and decided against presenting any exculpatory evidence. Of the people who were on the state witness list prior to the murder trial, Cantu's defense did not interview a single one. Duff also found that the investigating officers improperly coached witnesses and withheld evidence. During the closing arguments, one of Cantu's defense attorneys even claimed that his own client was guilty. I didn't say he was innocent. I said he's not guilty of capital murder. Time is running out. Stop this senseless execution. Ivan Cantu's new execution date is fast approaching. Governor Abbott and the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles are being urged by anti-death penalty advocates to do everything in their power to stop the execution. Texas governors have acted to halt executions just 3 times since 1976, but there are instances in recent history where executions have been halted. When Rodney Reed was scheduled to be executed in 2019, a worldwide movement resulted in a stay of execution. In 2022, international outrage led to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals issuing a stay for Melissa Lucio. Only mass action from the people can put pressure on the state of Texas to stop this senseless execution of Ivan Cantu, who never got a fair trial. All right. So in regards to, let's talk about not necessarily Texas, but just the death penalty in general. It's like such another morally bankrupt process, right, of justice. Let's remember that laws don't always equate justice or morality. Something like you killed somebody, so we're going to kill you to teach people that killing is bad is morally bankrupt. On top of that, with so much evidence or lack of evidence or proper evidence, we might be killing an innocent person. So we should. There is like definitely no reason to support the death sentence. We could be killing innocent people, dozens of them. As we know, the systems are very flawed. A lot of clues, a lot of evidence, a lot of procedures make for very faulty prosecutions. It's just like in a civilized society, I don't think something like the death sentence should be a thing. Then again, neither should we be working or processing or creating interventions across the world, sanctions, exploiting other nations. But here we are, right, with very morally bankrupt leaders on both the left and the right. Excuse me, let me correct that. In the center and the right, because Democrats are not left. They're neoliberals. They're centrist right. They're not far right like Republicans. But again, as I stated, it's morally bankrupt, this whole process of the death sentence. Even prison time is a bankrupt idea if you think about it. It doesn't really serve anybody except for elitists. They use prison labor for the benefit of corporations. And what do you teach people when you put them in cages? What is the morale? What is the rehabilitation process here when you're telling people that they have to live in cages for years and then step back out into the world and assimilate? Yeah, okay, get real, right? If one small quick event or one tragic event causes harmful trauma that's hard to reparate over years, imagine what years of living in a cell does to you. So for me, it's a big no on the death sentence. We're talking here. I'm talking more about restorative justice, rehabilitation for people, right? The moral thing to do in a civilized society, if we really are a civilized society. In regards to Ivan here, I do hope that he gets his day in court to prove his innocence or prove by full affirmation of the facts that he is guilty. And hopefully a true justice be served, rehabilitative, restorative justice, not what we call here in America justice by putting people in cages which is totally morally bankrupt. Don't support it. Don't support the death sentence for sure. All right. So that's it for that article. Going to go back here. Texas scheduled to execute. All right. There's a lot of good stuff here, and I'm not really tired. I'm going to try to do a whole hour today. So I'm going to try to read this next one. Just give me a second to drink a little tea. Just gonna. Last time I turned off the video to drink my tea. I think I should do the opposite. I should mute the mic perhaps, or maybe I should just take myself out of the picture entirely. It's actually just a few seconds, so I'm just gonna drink my tea. All right, let's move on to the next article here. Israeli ministers call for ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and colonization of Gaza at Victory of Israel conference. Right? What kind of madness is this? I guess that's my catchword this month. Morally bankrupt. Why? Because it's one thing to make a mistake and learn from your mistake and try to move forward and try to make right the wrongs in the world. It's another thing to just go full fascist or full Nazi or full genocidal and try to gaslight people into thinking that this is the just thing to do. Big anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic, big anti-Zionist. Israel does not belong there. But anyways, Israel minister calls for ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and colonization of Gaza at Victory of Israel conference. It should be called the Victory of Ghouls Conference. All right. Article by Amanda Yee, January 30th, 2024. The photo here is the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, speaking at the Victory of Israel conference. Credit screenshot from Channel 4 News. All right, here we go. Let's be clear. Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people since October 7 has been about one thing and one thing only: the permanent resettlement of the Gaza Strip. Israeli authorities are themselves open about this, and this fact was never more apparent than on Sunday, January 28th, when thousands of participants attended the Victory of Israel's conference. Settlement brings security. Event held in occupied East Jerusalem. While Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has claimed publicly he has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population, Sunday's conference brought out Israeli cabinet members and key policymakers in his own coalition government, including fascist ministers of national security Itamar Ben-Gvir, a settler himself who lives in the Kiryat Arba settlement in the occupied West Bank. At the conference, presenters discussed details and plans to resettle the Gaza Strip and unveiled a new map displaying a plan for re-establishing of 15 Zionist settlements, plus the addition of 6 new ones, to be built where recently destroyed Palestinian residences are building and to be built where recently destroyed Palestinian residences and buildings once stood. All right, so we're looking at this little wild fascist genocidal dream map with all these little stars. It's utterly disgusting. A map unveiled at the Victory of Israel conference, which shows plans of resettlement of Gaza. Credit X. It's just gross. Explosion of Zionist settlements, 2006 elections, Israeli siege. In 2005, after a 38-year-long military occupation, sustained armed resistance by Palestinian forces during the Second Intifada drove the Israeli government to dismantle all its settlements in the Gaza Strip and unilaterally withdraw. Then, after Hamas decisively won the majority of parliamentary seats in the January 2006 Palestinian Legislative Council elections, Israel responded by imposing a suffocating siege around the enclave as a form of collective punishment. As part of this siege, Israel has enforced a brutal land, air, and sea blockade on the Strip, controlling 2 of its 3 entry points, with Egypt controlling the third, the Rafah border crossing. Through this siege, Israeli authorities dictated and controlled every aspect of Palestinian life in Gaza, from how far fishermen could fish off the coast, to how much aid and food could enter, to who could and could not leave Gaza, even for medical treatment. Israel even calculated the precise number of caloric needs for the Gaza population and allowed just enough food supplies in to keep them on the brink of starvation. It is these conditions which led to many rights groups to call Gaza an open-air prison. The Arabs will move. The expulsion of Zionist settlements from Gaza was a controversial event in Israeli society, with many believing it to be the political miscalculation that led directly to the Palestinian resistance counteroffensive of October 7th, the planned Israeli land grab of Gaza, and permanent displacement of the Palestinian population from it, then is presented as a security measure which corrects the sin. In fact, at the conference, Ben-Tul told the audience, "We must encourage voluntary migration. Let them leave. Part of correcting the mistake of the sin of the preconception that brought us to October 7th is to return home to Gush Katif, southern Gaza, and to northern Samaria, West Bank. We have to return home because that is the Torah, that is morality, that is historic justice, that is logic, and that is the right thing." Other conference participants echoed Ben-Gvir's sentiments. All right, I've probably been saying it wrong. Other conference participants echoed Ben-Gvir's sentiments. Daniela Wise, former mayor of Zionist settlement Kedumim in the occupied West Bank, encouraged starvation as a measure to expel Palestinians from Gaza. "The Arabs will move," Wise stated to an interviewer at the conference. "We don't give them food. We don't give them, the Arabs, anything. They will move. They will have to leave. The world will accept them." Israeli authorities were open about their plans to displace the Palestinian population and colonize Gaza. Even if this war turns voluntary migration into a situation where it is forced, we must settle Gaza with security forces and settlers, declared Israeli Communications Minister Shlomo Karai. Encouraging immigration from Gaza is a necessity. Immigration. And Minister of Finance and Additions Minister of Defense Bezalel Smotrich declared that Israeli soldiers waging war in Gaza will remain as settlers and rebuild settlements. "We have come back to inherit the land." These calls for mass expulsion, starvation of the population, and ethnic cleansing fly in the face of the recent International Criminal Justice Provisional Ruling, which ordered Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent genocide in Gaza, prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip, and enable the provisions of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And just days after the ICJ ordered Israel to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza, the United States, UK, and Germany suspended their funding to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which provides humanitarian aid and key services to the Palestinian population. This move was prompted by an Israeli intelligence dossier, which baselessly alleged UNRWA had been infiltrated by members of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Next phase of genocide. Make no mistake, while this resettlement plan unveiled at Sunday's conference may be presented as a security necessity, it is nothing more than an open colonization and land theft. Since October 7th, not only has Israel killed over 26,000 Palestinians in Gaza, it has destroyed hospitals, residential buildings, schools, mosques, and other critical infrastructures in a deliberate attempt to make life uninhabitable for those remaining in the Strip. Resettlement of Gaza is Israel's planned next phase of this genocide. The demands raised by the Palestine Solidarity Movement remain all the more urgent and imperative, and all U.S. aid to Israel and the occupation. I'll reread that last sentence and hopefully read it right. Resettlement of Gaza, and I already got it wrong. Again, resettlement of Gaza is Israel's planned next phase of this genocide. The demands raised by the Palestinian Solidarity Movement remain all the more urgent and imperative, and all U.S. aid to Israel and the occupation. So I've been reading these articles, and it's crazy how it just gets worse and worse. Like, look at this map. And the defunding of the always get the abbreviation wrong here. The UNRWA. That's just Googlish. So they haven't even verified that the accusations are factual. They just take everything that Israel says by word as truth. So this really is just a full genocidal displacement of the people just for control of the land. It's really a colonization project, and Israel is just a tentacle or arm of imperialism by the Western powers. They're just tools, literally. This isn't the Israel or the Jewish people of old Israel from the Old Testament that was disbanded back over 1,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, actually. That Israel hasn't been around for over 2,000 years. This new Israel is just a military state, and it was created by Western powers, and it's funded by Western powers to have control over the Middle East and their minerals and their oil. It's just a goal to keep the Middle East destabilized. What the end goal here is for Israel to take over the whole Middle East. That's what I think it is. And every time that they say that that's not what they're doing, they're just going to move the goalpost. They're going to say, no, we're done here. In a few years, they're going to move the goalpost. So again, just look at all of Palestine. Look at how much they've taken. They've literally left Palestinian people, which is a mixture of culture and religions, with about maybe 10% of the land. And now they want to take that too, It's disgusting. It really is disgusting, considering that no real Jewish person should even accept or consider this as a real Israel, and shouldn't even consider it as a moral act, putting into context that Jewish people were almost exterminated by Germans and Hitler, that was a genocide for them. So what are we worried here? We're worried about Native Americans who were almost practically genocided in America, the biggest colonial project in the world. Then the Jewish, which we didn't go to war because they were killing Jews, by the way. We went to World War II. America got involved because it was hitting their bank. It was hitting their pockets, really. But nevertheless, the Jews were spared. They were helped. They were rescued. The world came together. Perhaps for different reasons, but and Germany was split into two parts, And instead of giving Jews a state on German land or anywhere else in Europe, they decided to impose a new Jewish state of Israel on land where a Jewish state hadn't been around for centuries, where nobody invited them or approved of it. So this is clearly a colonist project, and it's clearly an empire project to just have control over the Middle East. I totally don't support it. I don't know how much more I can say about it. I mean, if you watch the videos of what they're doing to women, children, and the people that live in the Gaza Strip, it's just horrific. It's just morally bankrupt, and I'm not going to support it. And I'm not going to be nice to people that want to support it either. I'm just going to tell them how I think it is. I think it's morally bankrupt to support Zionists, period. All right, so let's move on to January. All right, let's see what's next here. I think the next couple articles are short, so okay. Israeli women soldiers, partners, let's see here. Oh, 8-minute read. Well, this is a long one, actually. You know what? There's only 2 more articles to go. And honestly, these are really good articles, so I'm going to keep reading. Give me a second to drink my tea, and I'll keep reading, I guess. It's a good evening. It's a good evening for reading. All right, I'm doing this solo, so let me check the audio. Make sure everything's good here. Check. All right. Well, everything sounds good. We're going to move on. I'm going to get a little closer, actually. Test. All right. Hopefully that helps with the audio. All right, next article. Israeli women soldiers, partners in racism and genocide, not examples of gender equality. Oh, this one's going to be awesome. We're going to get deep on this article. Joyce Shediak is the writer on this one. January 30th, 2024. This is awesome. You got to hand it to these writers. This is true love of labor here. All right. So let me describe the picture for those listening here. The banner drop in Geneva, New York, liberation photo. So it's women at an overpass holding banners. One of them says, Palestine is a feminist issue. Peace and love for kids in Gaza. Stop the killing. Say no to genocide. Free Palestine. Feminists say no to genocide. Free Palestine. All right. I'm not going to try to rush through this. This is an 8-minute read. All right. Here we go. Women and children are the main victims of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. Israeli officials admit that targeting women and children is a deliberate policy. Palestinian women's groups calling the genocide a feminist issue urge all who value women's rights to back a ceasefire. Yet to the New York Times, this is not the women's story to write about. In a travesty of women's rights, The Times hails the Israeli military for permitting women soldiers to kill Palestinians in Gaza. The Times reportage of the genocide in Gaza is highly selective. The U.S. establishment's newspaper of record has been called out repeatedly by activists for its biased and racist coverage of Israel's war on Palestine and for spinning the news in an effort to manufacture consent for the genocide in Gaza and shield Israel from accountability. This newspaper did even not cover the giant demonstration in Washington, D.C. on January 13th, 400,000 people strong, calling for a ceasefire, an end to the sanctions against Gaza, and for the U.S. to stop arming Israel. On January 20th, the Times found a way to weaponize feminism against the women of Gaza by praising the IDF for letting more Israeli women fight. Amplifying Israeli war propaganda. The front page article, headlined Israeli Women Fight for Frontline in Gaza, a first, reads, after a long struggle for acceptance, Israel's female combat soldiers are pushing new boundaries after rushing into battle on October 7th. We learned that a woman now commands a company of 83 soldiers, nearly half of them men. It is one of several mixed-gender units fighting in Gaza, where female combat soldiers and officers are serving on the front line for the first time since the war surrounding the establishment of Israel in 1948. There are also 2 all-women tank crews on the ground in Gaza. The Times calls this a victory over ultra-conservative rabbis and religiously observant soldiers by feminists, secularists, and critics of the country's traditional macho culture. Not far behind this women-washing of genocide is pink-washing. Same-sex partners of slain soldiers are now legally recognized widows and widowers. Since October 7th, and since that date, at least one transgender soldier has fought on the front in Gaza. This has been used by the IDF to bolster its image, the article explains. Female combat soldiers have become symbols of progress and equality, appearing on magazine covers and featured in television's new profiles. And now the Times is using them to bolster the IDF too, reaching a broader international audience. Are the 2 tanks operated by women among those involved in the storming of Al-Khair Hospital in Khan Yunis, arresting their staff and preventing ambulances from rescuing the wounded? Are the women in combat for the first time among the snipers shooting Palestinians dead as they search for food or water for their families? Are they guarding the bulldozers now flattening huge swarms of Khan Yunis, forcing pregnant women to give birth in freezing tents because their homes were destroyed and they are blocked from hospitals? Equal gender opportunity to commit genocide is a cruel and obscene mockery of women's rights. To hail it, as this article does, is to provide cover for the Israeli military to continue the killing that primarily and deliberately targets women and children. This does not advance the rights of women, it sets them back. There is no skepticism in the article, no attempt to point out the contradictions of supporting gender equality in the IDF so women combat soldiers can kill Palestinian women in Gaza. Its writer, Times Jerusalem correspondent Isabel Kirchner, is part of this propaganda machine. Kirchner's son served in the IDF, and her husband works for the Institute for National Security Studies, leading a military and security think tank, which Kirchner often relies on as a source. Targeting women and children is intentional. The story not being told is that killing women and children in Gaza is not collateral damage. It is intentional, according to Giora Eiland, Israeli Army Reservist Major General, former head of the Israeli National Security Council, and advisor to the defense minister. Aylin's statement was among those showing genocidal intent that the South African government cited in its application to the International Courts of Justice. On November 19th, Aylin said, "Who are the poor women of Gaza? They are all the mothers. They are all the mothers, sisters, or wives of Hamas murderers. On the one hand, they are part of the infrastructure that supports the organization, and on the other hand, if they experience a humanitarian disaster, then it can be assumed that some of the Hamas fighters and the more junior commanders will begin to understand that the war is futile." Eliand added, "Severe epidemics in the southern Gaza Strip will bring victory closer and reduce casualties among IDF soldiers." 2 mothers killed every hour, a child killed every 10 minutes. Since October 7th, the Israeli military has deliberately created a women's rights crisis in Gaza. Some 70% of those killed are women and children. With starvation used as a weapon of war, women are the last to eat, and the children the first to die. A Palestinian child is killed in Gaza every 10 minutes. 2 mothers are killed every hour. Of the 1.9 million displaced, close to 1 million are women and girls. Pregnant women. With 61 hospitals and healthcare facilities damaged or destroyed, placed under siege, or forcibly evacuated, 5,500 women a month are given birth in unsafe conditions, where they are able to get to a functional hospital. Pregnant women are having to undergo cesarean sections without anesthetic. Premature births have increased by between 25 to 30% as pregnant women suffer stress and trauma from having to walk long distances in search of safety or to escape from bombs, from losing family members, and from being crowded into shelters in often foul conditions. At least 15% of Gaza births have complications requiring obstetric care. Not getting this care, women who would otherwise survive are dying before or during childbirth. Particularly in northern Gaza, cases of placental abruption, a serious condition that occurs to pregnant women during childbirth, which is potentially life-threatening to both mother and baby, have more than doubled. The Minister of Health for the State of Palestine, Dr. Rea-Along, has said that the only option facing Palestinian women in Gaza who bleed out or given birth is to undergo a hysterectomy in order for their lives to be saved. The World Health Organization warned that maternal deaths are expected to increase given the lack of access to adequate care. Children and babies. Lack of clean water is a crisis for mothers trying to feed babies. In the camps, poor or no sanitation is worsening. The risk of infection and medical complications are increasing, causing a spike in the number of babies dying from preventable causes like diarrhea and from the cold. A month ago, the Director General of the World Health Organization warned that Gaza was already experiencing soaring rates of infectious disease outbreaks. At that time, diarrhea cases among children aged under 5 were 25 times what they were before the Israeli attack. Women and girls. With about 1 million women and girls now displaced, some of them multiple times, access to water and to safe sanitation facilities, essential for managing menstrual hygiene, is non-existent. When those needs are unmet, it can lead to serious infections, including hepatitis B and thrush. In camps, as many as 700 people use a single toilet. The World Health Organization estimates that on the average in the camps, there is only one shower for every 4,500 people. Girls living in freezing tents are getting their first periods with no access to pads and without a mother to help them. Snuff videos of women soldiers. This is the women's issue in Gaza right now, and it is an extremely urgent one and surely one that Isabel Kirchner couldn't miss seeing, as she was ferried around on military vehicles to write her article. Israeli women combat soldiers in Gaza surely cannot miss this either. Some in the liberal establishment say that a woman's presence and natural compassion is what is needed to stop needless violence, and therefore that a gain for women somewhere is a gain for women everywhere. While some women and men in the Israeli military may eventually step forward and condemn the genocide, and a handful have refused to serve in Gaza, there is no indication that Israeli women in combat have shown compassion for the women of Gaza. Women combat soldiers have joined their male counterparts in sharing what some are calling snuff videos. These are social media postings made by Israeli soldiers themselves where they imitate, mock, and degrade Palestinians while standing in their demolished homes and institutions. These racist videos have sparked outrage and disgust and speak to the fact that no power holds the Israeli military accountable for its actions, and to the fact that the genocide is made possible by a unconditional 24/7 airlift of weapons from the Pentagon. One such video shows women in uniform happily dancing and hugging in a bombed-out area with elements of Palestinian life scattered about. In the midst of a starvation campaign where women are eating last to make sure their where Gaza women are eating less to make sure their children can eat, and 93% of the population faces crisis levels of hunger. One woman picks up a large sack with the markings of the rice bags distributed by UNWRA. It is open. With a grand and mocking gesture, she then flings the bag in the air, causing the rice to scatter on the ground. The Israeli soldiers are making these racist and sickening videos is conveniently left out on the New York Times coverage. That Israeli soldiers are making these racist and sickening videos is conveniently left out of New York Times coverage. Palestinian women are all of us. The New York Times has written many editorials over the decades backing women's rights and claims this is a principled position. However, misusing women's equality in such a warped, racist, and harmful way to support Israel genocide reveals that this media outlet's bottom line isn't principled positions. It's protecting the bottom line of the liberal establishment that it represents. The Times bolsters Israel because that state is the Pentagon's indispensable attack dog in the oil-rich Middle East and protects the profits of the Times board of directors by keeping down the indigenous population there. Let me read this because this is really important. This goes to the root of what's happening. The New York Times has written many editorials over the decades backing women's rights and claims this is a principled position. However, misusing women's equality in such a warped, racist, and harmful way to support Israel's genocide reveals that this media's outlet's bottom line isn't principled positions. It's protecting the bottom line of the liberal establishment that it represents. The Times bolsters Israel because that state is the Pentagon's indispensable attack dog in the oil-rich Middle East and protects the profits of the Times board of directors by keeping down the indigenous population there. In marked contrast to this misappropriation of gender equality, grassroots Palestinian women's groups within historic Palestine and in exile have declared ending the Gaza genocide a feminist issue. They have put forth an urgent call to all those truly interested in women's rights to join feminists worldwide and others fighting for a ceasefire to end the blockade and allow humanitarian aid into Gaza unimpeded and for a free Palestine. They point out that Palestinian women have been struggling for decades against the intersection of national, social, and economic oppressions, calling out the inherent patriarchal core of Israel's regime of oppression. They are part of the people's movement, the only force that has ever gained for workers and oppressed people in this country around the world. Palestinian women play leading roles worldwide in this people's movement, which has at its heartfelt mantra, no one can be free unless Palestine is free. Let me read that again. No one can be free unless Palestine is free. The women of Palestine show the world that struggle for gender justice cannot be separated from fighting oppression, discrimination, racism, colonialism, and militarism. No woman can really be free until all Palestinian women are safe from attack, have equality health care, food, and housing for themselves and their families, and can live with dignity in a free Palestine. Let me read that last sentence again. No woman can really be free until all Palestinian women are safe from attack, have quality health care, food and housing for themselves and their families, and can live with dignity in a free Palestine. Picture of the Palestinian flag in front of the New York Times. Recent protest in front of the New York Times office, liberation photo. Yeah, what can I say? The article is pretty specific and detailed, and we've already went over some of these points about the reason for this this war, this genocide. All right. Yeah, I guess I should just in summary say that it is important. It is a women's right. It is a feminist issue, and yeah, it's. I mean, the links aren't available here, but you can clearly look up videos of the atrocities that are happening in Gaza, of the morally bankrupt actions of the Zionist soldiers there, the IDF, totally grotesque, women or men, soldiers out there, totally morally bankrupt, totally brainwashed. All those people need rehab. And the Palestinian people need to be freed. And I hope it happens quickly. I hope nations do come to their aid one way or another. Cool. Oh, yeah. And one more thing. This UNRWA, that website, if you just type those letters into any Google search, UNWRA, don't forget that they have been practically defunded by the Western elites. So if you feel free, you have $10 or whatever, go to their website and donate. Donate what you can. All right. I'm going to take one more sip here. So I usually drink all kinds of teas, green tea, chai tea, maple tea. I water it down a lot. Like I practically fill this whole thing with hot water and some almond milk. If I want it a little sweeter, I'll usually add some honey to it. It's great. All right. Next article. Eagle Pass standoff. What's really behind the border dispute? All right. This article is written by Brianna Griffith, January 30th, 2024. It's a 5-minute read, so it's not too long. Eagle Pass standoff. What's really behind the border dispute? I have a few comments for this once we're done, for sure. All right. U.S. Border Patrol has been engaged in a standoff with the Texas Department of Public Safety and National Guard over control of Shelby Park, a small park in the usually quiet town of Eagle Pass. Right-wing media is portraying this as a heroic stand by cops and state forces under the control of Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. The Biden administration is claiming to have a more humanitarian border policy, even as they incarcerate and deport record numbers of immigrants. What is really going on? Is this a further continuation of a racist political stunt? Is this a battle between state and federal authority? A fissure in in ruling class power or something else entirely? And just as importantly, what should working class people do about it? What is the nature of current crisis at the border? The current crisis has its roots with the DPS occupation of Eagle Pass, which started last year. The Eagle Pass occupation is part of Operation Lone Star, a parallel immigration system set up by Abbott that is so unpopular, some National Guard soldiers enforcing it have even committed suicide. Residents have spoken out repeatedly about the occupation and the racist border stunt involving deadly razor wire and netting systems, but this stunt has real, terrible human stakes. On the night of January 12th, Mexican immigration officials alerted U.S. Border Patrol that two people were in distress on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande. Border Patrol agents informed National Guard troops who responded that they had orders to deny Border Patrol agents access to the river. Paxton has disputed this version of events, claiming that the Border Patrol agents did not ask for admission to Shelby Park to respond to an emergency, nor did they advise either the guardsman or the staff sergeant that any emergency situation existed. While federal and state forces bickered, Mexican authorities recovered the bodies of three additional drowning victims and rescued the two people in distress. The National Guard has since granted Border Patrol access to both sides of the fence and the boat ramp at the park, but this set into motion a chain of legal challenges as to whether the federal government has a right to access the entire park and or remove the razor wire. On January 22nd, the Supreme Court narrowly ruled 5-4 in favor of DHS that Border Patrol should be allowed to access the park and remove razor wire. The ruling has led to Paxton doubling down on denying entry to some areas of the park and grandstanding about preventing terrorism. He claimed on Fox News that Joe Biden is not just cooperating, but he's literally in partnership with Mexican cartels, and has claimed in the past that Hamas may sneak across the border. The current showdown, as right-wing media has put it, is over access to only part of the park. Is Biden's federal border policy pro-immigrant? The federal government under Biden has the right under the Constitution to enforce border policy. The current showdown rests on Abbott's claim that Biden is pursuing a reckless open border policy. But what is Biden's border policy? The Biden administration has worked to continue Trump's border wall by any means necessary, including waiving dozens of federal laws to keep the wall going. In 2022 and 2023, Southwest border apprehensions skyrocketed to over 2 million per year, more than double any year during the Trump administration. Deportations increased to 142,000 in 2023, nearly double from the year before. Nor do the optics of border enforcement look any better for Biden and the federal government. While Biden lifted the incredibly unpopular Title 42, the administration quickly enacted a nearly identical mass deportation policy. This is the same racist border patrol that deployed whips against Haitian refugees and whose off-duty member lynched a group of immigrants in West Texas, both under Biden's term in office. Let me repeat that because that is extremely ghoulish. This is the same racist border patrol that deployed whips against Haitian refugees and whose off-duty member lynched a group of immigrants in West Texas, both under Biden's term in office. So glad Biden won. Anyways, next paragraph. What is unique about the far right's immigration policy is its explicit racist rhetoric. While Democrats cloak their justification for Border Patrol violence in high-minded language about rule of law, Paxton, Abbott, Trump, and the far right openly employ far more racist, dehumanizing, and even genocidal language. Describing the refugee situation in militarized terms such as invasion and terrorism, Abbott has laid clear the far right's homicidal intent. The only thing that we're not doing is we're not shooting people who come across the border because, of course, the Biden administration would charge us with murder, he said in a recent radio interview. Texas has recently passed a heinous anti-immigrant Show Me Your Papers bill, which will enable police all across the state to enact the racist violence he is stoking at the border. What are the stakes of the standoff? Despite the spectacle of the Texas National Guard standing off against federal Border Patrol agents and the real problem of a vigilante militia calling itself God's Army heading to the border, the more immediate stakes for this standoff relate to the center of power in U.S. imperialism. Here we go. It is indisputable that according to U.S. law, the federal government, not state governments, has the right to enforce immigration policy. The far right is framing this as a states' rights issue. Abbott claims the right to enforce border policy through Operation Lone Star. At the same time, he and other Republicans are claiming that they are only enforcing the law because of the alleged failure of Biden to do so. Despite Texas politicians' grandiose claims, this is not primarily a question of federal versus state power. Many of the same Republican political figures involved in this battle are affiliated with the groups behind Project 2025, which would massively expand federal executive power if Donald Trump is reelected. The mantle of states' rights, as in the Civil War and Civil Rights eras, is a cover to push their agenda. The mantle of states' rights, as in the Civil War and Civil Rights eras, is a cover to push their agenda. The true reason for this standoff is the same divide in ruling class that has been fermenting for years about how to manage a declining U.S. empire. The faction lined up behind Abbott and Paxton believes that the key to managing the empire is rolling back the clock on formal democratic rights, while scapegoating national minorities to divide workers. The other, liberal faction holds many of the same policy views, but believes that the far right's openly racist rhetoric will actually destabilize the empire further. Neither faction really cares about workers of any nationality or immigration status. After all, is Biden's border patrol fighting to open the border? No, they are lobbying to keep the same violent anti-immigrant crackdowns, but with lesser razor wire. But with less razor wire. But with less razor wire. There, I said it right. Historically, in moments of ruling class divide between hyper-reactionary state governments and less reactionary federal governments, there is some precedent for the masses of working class people to intervene, to take a side. But these moments, such as the civil rights era, emerged only after oppressed people rose up in independent mass movements, well-organized, militant, and ready to fight for the goal of liberation. Concessions are won in struggle, not granted by benevolent authorities. Lining up behind either side in this border scuffle would be a slap in the face to the millions of immigrants affected by the U.S.'s racist, sexist, anti-worker border enforcement regime. In this struggle, it is necessary to reject both factions and build an independent working class pro-immigrant mass movement. We need to reject the entire premise behind U.S. border security, which is that immigrants and refugees are a threat to prosperity and well-being for non-immigrants. No, the threat to prosperity comes from the capitalists who report record profits even as they lay off more workers. The main threat to life and well-being is from the armed agents of the state, the police, military, and border patrol, who kill and destroy to protect the ill-gotten gains of the wealthy elites. Only a united working class, uncompromising in our defense of each other and unrelenting in our fight for collective liberation, can defeat the far right. Okay. Summary on this. Very easily, this is the way I put it. Why are immigrants coming to America legally or illegally, however they can? Well, let's see. The U.S. empire has carried out interventions, carried out coups, sanctions, and destabilized their lands, stolen their minerals, right? So why shouldn't they come? If you don't want people to come, don't destabilize, don't pillage, you know, don't exploit other lands. But then again, that's not what elites are going to tell you, right? They're going to tell you that they're just coming because we earned all our wealth here. No, we benefit as Americans from the exploitation of other nations. So when people come from other nations here to try to survive, I'm very sympathetic to them, and I say, welcome, welcome here. You know, it's the right thing to do morally, like I said, to support people, poor people, to lift them up, to educate them. Did America go to other nations and invest in their education, their medicine? No, America went to other nations to invade, to put up military bases, to control, to destabilize, and to exploit. You know, and this is the fruits of it. But since they can't tell you that, they're just going to tell you that immigrants are coming through the border because they want to steal your land, take your jobs, take your money. No, that's not how it works. You're benefiting from all of the destructive colonial movements of the empire. So that's the main issue. That's not what your elite representatives are going to tell you. They're never going to tell you the truth. They're just going to divide and conquer you. Secondly, there's plenty of resources in America. There's plenty of wealth to go around. But instead of spreading the wealth fairly, giving working class people more jobs, more education, more reinvesting in infrastructure here, living wages, what they do is they just take all the wealth, all the profits, and they give it back to their elite oligarchy investors, right? To their bag holders holding all the money bags. So there's multiple issues there that the mainstream media and these elite Republicans and Democrats running in their parties are not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you the truth, and they're just going to pit you against each other, telling you that you're an individual and this is an individualistic culture where you can survive if you work hard enough, right? Right. But if you work hard enough, the chances of you becoming a billionaire or a millionaire are like, I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1. So maybe even lower. So there's a lot of deprogramming to do in the American culture, and it's really hard, but this is the way to do it. Having streams, talking to people on the streets. We need to treat the left almost like a religion, but religion based on facts, right? To spread the truth, to tell people, and to show them the truth that is backed by evidence. Like I said, most of what I'm saying here is factual. You can look it up. You can do the research. You can find the truth, just like you can find the truth that the IDF in Israel is bombing and sniping women and children, and they have been doing so for decades, and they have been oppressing Palestinians for decades. So that's it for tonight. Thank you for listening. Let's see what else we have here. Let me see if any other articles snuck in. Nope, that's it. Eagle Pass was the last one. That was January 31st, 2024. That one came out today. Cool. So the read-along on Sunday will probably be a short one unless they drop like 6 articles from here to Sunday, which I doubt. But again, if the read-along is really short on Sunday, then I'll find other things to do. Perhaps read an article from somewhere else. Or we'll just cut it short for a day and just chat. Anyways, everyone have a great evening. Please keep reading. Keep asking questions if you have questions. Everyone have a good night. Ending the stream.